Welcome to our lesson on inheritance. The key questions for today are: how do organisms inherit certain characteristics? What is a gene? What is an allele? How do the alleles relate to the characteristic that is inherited? How can you calculate the probability of inheriting a characteristic? The key terms that you will need to know are gene, allele, phenotype, genotype, Punnett square. A gene is a section on a chromosome that codes for a specific characteristic. It can have more than one form, and these are called alleles. For example, the gene for fur colour in mice could have several forms, such as an allele for white fur and an allele for black fur. Most characteristics are controlled by a complicated interaction of several genes, but some are controlled by a single gene. The alleles for the gene can be described as dominant and recessive. Dominant alleles are always expressed if they are present, and recessive alleles are only expressed if there is no other allele present. The way that the genes are expressed as a characteristic is called the phenotype. The alleles inherited for the characteristic are called the genotype. During sexual reproduction, there are two parent organisms, so any offspring will inherit two alleles for each gene, giving their genotype, and the interaction of these alleles determines the phenotype. Let's take eye colour as an example of our inherited characteristic. A person could have a combination of alleles B for brown eyes and small b for blue eyes. Capital letters are given to dominant alleles and lowercase letters to recessive alleles. So the combination of alleles for eye colour could be BB, B small b and small b. These are the possible genotypes. The phenotypes are what the allele combination leads to in terms of the physical characteristic. So BB would result in brown eyes as there are two dominant alleles. B small b would also result in brown eyes because there is a dominant allele present. And as long as there is a dominant allele present, even just one, that allele will be expressed as the phenotype. The small b present is recessive, so this would only be expressed if no other allele was present. Someone with the genotype B small b, although they would have brown eyes, carry the allele for blue eyes. The genotype small b results in blue eyes as there is no other allele present, so the small b allele is expressed as the phenotype. We can work out the interactions of the alleles using something called a Punnett square. It works very much like a multiplication grid. To find out the possible genotypes of offspring, we would need to know the genotype of the two parents. Let's see the offspring genotypes for eye colour of parents who are heterozygous. This means they have two different alleles, so they must have the capital B allele and the small letter b allele. We put the parent genotypes in the sides of our grid. Task: what colour eyes would the parents have? They have brown eyes because of the presence of the dominant allele. We then add in the offspring genotypes, giving them an allele from each parent. The possibilities for the offspring are BB, capital B small b and small b, meaning the parents with brown eyes could have offspring with brown eyes or blue eyes. We can work out the probabilities by dividing the number with each characteristic by the four possibilities and multiplying by 100 to get a percentage. So the probability of brown eyes in the offspring is 75%. This is because the genotype BB and B small b would result in brown eyes, so it is 3/4 multiplied by 100, which is equal to 75%. The probability of blue eyes in the offspring is 25%. This is because the genotype small b would result in blue eyes, and there is 1 out of the 4 with this genotype. So 1 over 4 multiplied by 100 is equal to 25%. Of the genotypes of these offspring, 2 are described as homozygous. This means that they have 2 alleles that are the same, so BB and b are homozygous. This is different to heterozygous genotype that means 2 different alleles. Task: find the probability of blue eyes in the offspring of a mother who has brown eyes with the genotype B, and a father with blue eyes. 2 out of the 4 have the genotype B that results in brown eyes, and 2 have the genotype b that results in blue eyes. So, 2 over 4 multiplied by 100 is equal to 50% probability of blue eyes. We needed to work out the genotype of the father. As stated in the question, he has blue eyes, so this means he must have 2 b alleles, as there would not be a dominant B present. Extension: if 2 parents have blue eyes, what is the probability of having a child with brown eyes? If both parents have blue eyes, there is no dominant B allele for brown eyes present, so there is 0% probability of a child with brown eyes. The inheritance of alleles can be shown in a different way using symbols to represent the parents and the offspring, with filled-in and empty symbols to show the different phenotypes. From the phenotypes of the parents and offspring, you can work out the genotypes. This example is taken from an AQA exam question. The circles represent females and the squares males. They are either affected or unaffected by a condition called Stickler syndrome that is carried by a dominant allele. This means that only one allele needs to be present for the person to be affected by the condition. The dominant allele for Stickler syndrome is denoted by a capital A, and the recessive allele for unaffected by Stickler syndrome is a lowercase a. Person 1 is an unaffected male, so must have the genotype lowercase a, as there is no dominant allele present. Person 2 is an affected female, so could have the genotype A, lowercase a, or A. We would need to look at the offspring to decide. We can see that the offspring of person 1 and 2 do not all have Stickler syndrome. In fact, just 1 out of 4 does. This means that person 2 must have the genotype A, lowercase a, as they have passed on the recessive allele to 3 of their offspring and the dominant A allele to 1. If person 2 had the genotype A, all of their offspring would have the condition, as they would all have inherited an A allele from person 2. Task: complete this AQA exam question. Stickler syndrome is caused by the inheritance of a dominant allele. The diagram shows the inheritance of Stickler syndrome in 2 families. Using the following symbols in your answers to D and E, explain why none of the children of persons 7 and 8 have Stickler syndrome. Extension: person 12 marries person 18. Use a Punnett square diagram to find the probability that their first child will be a female with Stickler syndrome. Person 7 and person 8 do not have any A alleles as they are unaffected, the recessive characteristic, so they must have the genotype a, meaning that their offspring can only inherit a alleles. Person 12 must have the genotype A, lowercase a, as they are affected, but one parent was not, so they must have one lowercase a allele and the dominant allele to make them affected by Stickler syndrome. Person 18 is unaffected, so must have the genotype lowercase a, lowercase a. The A, lowercase a offspring could have Stickler syndrome, so there is a 50% chance of a child having Stickler syndrome. but the question says female child. So we add in the X and Y chromosomes to give us a probability of 25%. This is the one with the capital X, capital X, and the capital A, lowercase a genotypes.